And vibe coding is the same thing. It's the punk rock of coding.
Yes.
Is this punk rock?
No.
Wise man once said, "You're crazy for this one, Rick." I'm Ray Myers. Welcome to Craft versus Cruft. And I have a special guest today. We're going to get a little outside the box with this episode. We have actually, you don't know, one of my best friends in the entire world, Kelly Betz. How long have we known each other?
17 years.
Roughly, yeah. And you also have the distinct honor of being the first person to appear on Craft versus Cruft who isn't like a directly programmer adjacent, at least, person by trade. I interview with mostly programmers turned managers. You currently work in addiction counseling? Is that
I do. I am
accurate?
an addiction counselor. I had to throw in, I did just buy a Linux computer, so.
Yeah. I was really excited to hear about that. It's like, okay, we got more content. Kelly installs Linux. That's a whole series. We can do it on your channel if you want, but which I quite enjoy his channel as well. What are some of the topics you've covered on there so far?
It's been basically ethics in music, and covering Ray Gunn, the breakdancer, doing an in-depth dive on there, and then Juggalo culture. I recently examined and got a huge backlash from because not a crowd that enjoys criticism, which maybe makes me just want to keep doubling down. But yeah, ethics in music. That's where I'm at right now.
That is exactly where we want to go today. A rare crossover of ethics in music and programming. And let's just start by watching this clip. I'm going to show you maybe a little longer clip of it.
A thing that happened in music, kind of in the transition from the kind of, I would say, the virtuosity era of the kind of 70s and early 80s going into kind of a little bit both punk rock, but then into hip hop, was there was like this, when you didn't have to be a virtuoso, the energy of the music became completely different. And you got these whole different kind of sounds, ideas, everything. But you seeing something similar with vibe coding where like software is going to be a whole different experience now?
It's the same idea of the democratization of a technology. So in the past, for music, you had to go to the conservatory and study for years and years, and then someday you could play in a symphony. And then when punk rock came along, you could maybe learn 3 chords in a day. And then there were all these bands, and that made it everybody. And that was how I started in music, was punk rock. If you had something to say, you could say it. You didn't need the expertise or skill set other than your idea and your ability to convey it. And vibe coding is the same thing. It's the punk rock of coding.
Can you just briefly share a bit of your background in music and particularly punk music?
Sure, yeah. I was introduced to punk rock at an early age and started booking shows when I was just 15 in like community centers and Knights of Columbus, and was in multiple bands before I ever even knew how to play a power chord. He said, you got to learn 3 chords. I knew 0. I went in with 0 and learned music from friends. And I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have a instruction book. It was just us figuring it out together, which took longer, but I appreciate the mentality of. So I'm truly self-taught, you might call it. I continued booking punk shows for about a decade. I've been in touring bands, and when I say tour, I don't mean green rooms and craft service. I mean different basements, and I've played a bowling alley and a laundromat, and lived in the van when we were off tour some of the time. I've also been involved in like houses where train hoppers would stay there, and Hitchhikers was kind of a hub with a rotating cast of people. I've worked at a few of those collectives, if you will. I've also taken part in starting different DIY venues, keeping them going. Sometimes like free libraries and that stuff would happen inside of those venues. And to a small degree, I'm still involved today in that, in particular, in organizing and being part of an artistic collective. But mainly for me at this age, punk rock is a mentality. It's a perspective on the world. And it's also a place that my ethics flow from, and that I can check myself. It's a community that I can kind of check in with to help with moral guidance as well as different lifestyle ideas. And it's yeah, it's punk rock is everything to me.
We should definitely get into the specifics of what that ethos is. For those of you who are watching Craft versus Cruft for the programming and are not, big music heads, you may not know who Rick Rubin is. We should maybe just briefly introduce, because that's a figure, in the music world we've been familiar with for quite a while as well.
Yeah, and I mean Rick Rubin, he was at some real punk shows. He was in a real punk band for a little bit there. And then I think his attention turned to hip hop, and he, helped put together the Beastie Boys and mold them as, the first white hip hop act, and it obviously was successful. Of course, they quickly had a falling out after that because of some scummy business dealings. If the Beastie Boys have a problem with you, I probably have a problem with you. He then went on to continue to produce in and out of hip hop. Most notably, I'd say like System of a Down is a harder album that he did, and work with Jay-Z, many other hugely successful artists. But at this point, is almost more exists as a meme on the internet, where this kind of the chapter we're in kind of falls more in my opinion. Just because he's a big character and he says ridiculous things on a regular basis.
Yeah, like over the last few years, he's notoriously been saying in interviews like things like he doesn't know how to work a mixing board, and he's very much emphasizing that his role is sort of his, confidence in what his tasted and what sounds good, and he works with artists and they know how to make the sounds, but he's like, you know, kind of this idea person who's increasingly behind the scenes as when you get to just a certain level in the industry, like he's not a hands-on producer, he's an executive producer, maybe the executive behind that executive or something like that. Is that about right?
That is what he says. I mean, that's a really famous, quote from him. Also, it's a lie. He definitely was engineering on albums in the 80s. I'm sure the boards aren't that different. And even if he didn't know, he could learn. Someone would teach him easily. I think that he just wants to present as some like ethereal being whose mere presence just, brings out, diamond from everybody. Sorry about the curse, but I don't buy it. I don't believe his shtick. I don't believe his angle. I think he's just trying to sound a certain way. He's trying to transcend the music business, which is what he's involved in. And if it is true, let's say he just ignored how anything technical happened in music for the last 30 years. That would make him, according to himself, more of an A&R. If his job is taste, then he would be an A&R. He'd be a booking agent. He would not be a producer of albums.
We may end up more on anti-Rick on this particular day than pro, but I will, preface this by saying he has been non-trivially involved in some of my favorite music to ever exist. Between System of a Down, Jay-Z, Beastie Boys, Johnny Cash, these are situations where even if he made one suggestion the entire time, but it's what sent that into I still have to have some amount of appreciation for that.
Absolutely. I mean, he's found himself in the right room consistently for decades. And, part of the reason I'm so cynical and critical of him is because it's like I know him so well. So for him to just at 60 or whatever kind of fall apart and be talking out of his ass when he was known for, keeping it real, it's disappointing. It's upsetting. And you've made me focus on it today. So
yeah. So I did ask for this. Now, you're watching him comment on something called vibe coding, but you may not now know what vibe coding is. So in order to say if it's the new punk rock, maybe I should describe this for you. How up are you on what that whole conversation is even?
I don't really know. I mean, it sounded like just allowing outsiders to code or coding from feeling rather than, brainstorming and having a clear direction,
So
or goals.
you've used ChatGPT or something similar, I imagine.
Yeah.
You can ask ChatGPT to write an essay for you. You can also ask ChatGPT to write programs. and then you can paste it into the thing that runs programs, and sometimes it works. And I've seen the potential as many did. I've been working on trying to make this work a little better for the last couple of years. And so, there are even things we call coding agents that will sort of do the thing for you of pasting it into the thing that runs programs, watching it break, trying to fix it. So it's like you ask for one thing and then it's like ChatGPT spinning, trying to make it work for, maybe a few seconds to several minutes. Vibe coding, became this meme a couple months ago, actually. Just this explosion. It's like someone made a tweet, and like 3 months later, you've got billionaires talking to Rick Rubin about it. Someone named Carpathy talked about, well, when I'm using these, I'm doing something I'm calling vibe coding where I forget the code's even there. So you're not just like watching it. Here's a suggestion. Let me put this in and look at it. Like, no, it's just doing it. You're sort of watching what's, running the effects of the program, but you've just forgotten that the layer in, that's of source code is even there. And people have had good results with this on rapid prototyping. Like I want a quick demo of something to see if this is even something I want. Trying to do serious work, even Carpathy says like it's not even close to what I would do with serious work. But nonetheless, people just are really enchanted by the possibility of forgetting that the code is there. And as someone who you don't want to look at code, like you would probably find that unpleasant. So you could probably relate to that in some capacity. And if I were a guitarist and I'd like to make noise, but I don't want to ever play a scale a day in my life, like me as someone like I played cello, but I haven't played guitar much, like that would sound really appealing to me. People excited about creating software without actually doing the part where you write software, then it gets compared to punk rock. And what could be more punk rock than a record producer worth $30 million being interviewed by two billionaires to sell a product that he's never used, right? This is where I lend you the floor here. Is this punk rock?
No.
Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Show. It sounds like hippie stuff, and punks hate hippies. I hate hippies because at the end of the day, while punk allows an attitude and a mindset that gets you to try things that others might be gatekeeping, that doesn't mean you should intentionally be bad, and it definitely doesn't mean that you should just go in blindly or just do things exactly how you want when you want them. That the whole word vibe is just so off to me to compare that to punk. There couldn't be anything further than a feeling of the feeling you get from punk rock than vibing. And to break that down a little bit, I would say punk rock means living with intention. If you're going to engage in like the DIY spirit and try to live as a punk, that means you're going to take autonomy of your own life and your decisions and what you do with your art. And that's why everything is DIY. That's why everything is hands-on. And I think the first thing you do if you want to become a punk rocker is you make some of your own clothes. Suddenly you're a fashion designer. You learn about anti-fashion, which is the rips and then torn back together. And sure, it looks unprofessional, but also you want to learn to sew as best as you can. They test you on this. They quiz you on this in your first year. How's your sewing ability, right? And how is your ability to make patches? Are you learning to play your instrument? The idea is not just to say, well, I don't know what I'm doing. And that is the entirety of punk rock. It's a space that allows for people that don't yet know how to do it.
So are you saying now? Usually the first example out of my head is Ramones, but is there a better prototypical like punk band that we should use as an example before I even?
I mean, to me, when I really think of punk bands, I think of all local bands. So, when you're like, what is the quintessential punk? It's like, I don't know, something from Columbia 20 years ago, when I was the most excited about it. And that's how I consume punk too. Like, yeah, I'll listen to some classics, but I'm not like in a deep dive of somebody's discography. That's the Ramones. They've got hits, but yeah, I want to go see it live. I want to shake the people's hands and know who they are as people. I mean, it's an integrated experience, and no one is on a pedestal, and that's kind of the whole idea. So, while the Ramones are hugely influential, once you give them $1 million and consider them otherworldly or better than, they definitely become less punk, right?
Mm.
Um, which is relevant here. I want to clarify that so I love 70s punk. It's huge. It's like that's the recorded punk that I listen to on a regular basis. However, the scene and people's mentalities have changed so much. You know, like some of those guys in the Ramones, they were like, you know, Republicans, and there was a bunch of weird fascist shit in like the 70s and early 80s in punk, and we've kind of like pushed them to a different place. Those are not punks. They aren't with us. You know, they're just stealing our aesthetics and, you know, and sound. And so as punk moved out of the 70s in its first wave, it kind of grew a soul. It built its own code of ethics, and it built its own defined parameters. It wasn't just who plays loud, fast songs. It was, do you belong to this tribe that has these certain beliefs? And those beliefs, whether you like it or not, are radical leftism, like across the board. You cannot be a conservative punk. Sorry, you aren't welcome. And I mean that very practically. I mean, come to a local punk show and you will be booted if you're a Trump supporter. You'll get your ass kicked having a MAGA hat on. Like, we do not tolerate that shit. And somewhere along the line, punk has become some concept, as if you're a contrarian and if you're against the grain, these automatically make you punk. And that is not the truth. I don't care what some other like 40-year-old out of touch loser is going to tell you. Like, come to the show and see. We are an actual group of people. Like, you know.
Let's break these different, you know, conceptions of it down, because you also mentioned the contrarian one. So like, idea one is that the main thing, you know, the Ramones and this long list of people were doing is they were getting in the booth, didn't know how to play instruments. Like, that's the main, you know, and you're talking about things that, like, what was striking about them wasn't that they weren't virtuosos on the, you know, musically. And like, by the way, they could indeed play their instrument. They were indeed playing what's
I
on
was
the
going to say,
record, unlike a lot of people, especially
yeah,
now.
yeah, you're using a limited and weird definition of not able to play, or like not knowing how the music works. I think that people play this up all the time. Like, you know, let's take Kurt Cobain, right, who brought punk to the masses famously. You know, he's sometimes talked about as if he was an idiot savant, as if he didn't know how to intentionally write amazing hit pop songs. And he did over and over again. And everyone around him is like, yeah, Kurt Cobain wanted to be the biggest musician in the world, and then he successfully accomplished that. I don't know if that counts as not being able to play your guitar. You know, the Ramones were musically genius because they could play simply, and that's what people wanted to hear at the time. They wanted simple, aggressive music. So I'm not sure how there was a need that they met by saying we're going to be the first people to have a 90-second song, and it's going to be verse, chorus, chorus out. That's doing a damn good job at playing guitar if you thought of that, right? You don't go to a museum and see like Andy Warhol's soup can and go, he didn't know how to paint. It's like, no, he made
Like,
iconic artwork.
there was, and I think this is where people get confused. Like, there's a difference between being unskilled and being able to use a very simple foundation to tell a powerful message, right? Like,
Sure,
there's a cutting simplicity to,
absolutely.
you know, a Kurt Cobain song sometimes, to, you know, should I stay or should I go by the Clash, to like Beat on the Brat by the Ramones, you know, like, just very cutting simplicity. And I've heard many hours, maybe hundreds of hours of music by people who were not good at playing instruments, that did not have that cutting, crystallized simplicity of intention.
Absolutely. You know, in punk, you can not know how to play, but not knowing how to play doesn't make you punk. It's just allowed. That's all. You're just given opportunity to grow as a musician while you're doing it, and it's much more about attitude than it is about any kind of complexity.
It's also, you mentioned not just being a contrarian.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
So
sheer
what's the difference
rebellion.
between being contrarian and being punk? Because obviously people did see the punks and feel like these are some rebels. These are contrarian people.
Sure. Absolutely. But, someone with a rebel flag, that is right. That is against the grain. That is, you're breaking social norms, but you don't just automatically break the social norms to become punk. You simply stop caring about them. It's about looking at our social systems, social constructs, definitions, and saying, maybe we can move past this. Maybe people should, be comfortable expressing themselves whatever way they want. And simply having something that pisses people off. I don't know where anger and punk got conflated, as if it angers people, it's punk rock. Again, that's not how it works. Like, it just is not how it works. If I put on a cape, I'm not a superhero. It's more complex than that. But I get it. People want to oversimplify. I mean, punk does piss people off. I think that being riled up, there aren't many other genres that want to get you upset. So I can see how you might get confused, but not everything that upsets you is punk rock.
And yeah, that is a way in which these, like, he wasn't comparing them in that way, but in it is notoriously causing a lot of people to be angered, frustrated. Like, it's very immediately controversial idea. But it's really, the signal is like, is AI inevitably going to be the one doing the low level of all this, what we currently think of as precision work? And you can't even argue for, oh, it's making bad art even now. It's making all this, it's being called AI slop, right? Because people use it, very consistently when they don't care about the output, and it's not going to care about the output for you. And so there's lots of bad AI art, but I think the proponents want to say that, um, well, it doesn't even matter what is now, because wherever it'll be better, it'll be whatever you want it to be tomorrow. So there's no point in disagreeing with it today.
Yeah, and I also don't think that that's in line with punk. First of all, it's stupid because you're just refusing to. You're like, oh, I'll gauge things on a metric where hypothetically, it's like you get caught by security. You're like, I was gonna pay for it, but it's
The
down
next
the
model will
way.
pay for it.
Yeah, and I would say that punk is very much about using what you actually have in front of you and seeing if you can get something out of it. You know, I just hated AI is not punk rock, and I the idea that we should give in because there's an inevitability. Okay, again, antithetical to punk rock, right? We have autonomy. We are focused on autonomy and empowering ourselves and each other and empowering our communities. So to say, well, the computers take over eventually anyway. He said, I wrote down a quote. He said, the universe is pulling me into this, and that's why he did it.
Following week, there's a company called Cursor, which I don't really know what they do, but it seems to be something to do with coding.
Yes.
You had the 15 rules of vibe coding, and my picture was at the top. And I thought, it's just so strange. This is obviously the universe is pulling me into this. And how do I participate? What's my role? What am I supposed to do now? What would be more interesting than writing a book about something I don't know anything about?
Okay, can you imagine a punk saying that? It's like, well, this is just where the stream of life took me, man. It's like, it's just whatever. I'm just to let it flow. No, punk rock is about saying no and taking control of your own life. That is the opposite. And I think it's also like, look, I live comfortably, but hearing him is just like privilege seeping out of his mouth. Like, he's got the pool behind him. And it's just like, that is, this is a little off topic, but that is unethical. You cannot be, I'll say it both ways. You cannot be an ethical millionaire and you can't be a punk millionaire. You have to give back to your community. You have to invest in your community and other people. That's part of what this deal is. That's been its effect on my life and why I've spent so much of my time in public service. You go from throwing bricks at government buildings, not that I allegedly did that, but to saying, all right, what's going to actually have some impact, as you age. And that's my responsibility that I learned from just social consciousness. And so to be sitting there with the privilege to look like that much of a clown and have people take you seriously with the giant pool behind you that could have fed people, could have done anything else but being a prop for him to use in interviews. It's like I just remember hearing that the guy from Offspring had a private jet that he knew how to fly, and he painted an anarchy symbol like on the back, tail wing. And somebody's got to stop these people.
Well, today it's you.
We'll see.
With that, do you have any final quotes to leave us on?
Rick Rubin is not only not punk rock, he's not doing Zen Buddhism very well either.
Or indeed Taoism.
But someone else could break that down.
And as Lao Tzu said, with patience, the most tangled cord may be undone. Thank you, Kelly.